Hello my creative friends. Today I'm going to be showing you how I'm going to create a 3D rose to put inside of that pretty little frame from the Dollar Tree. For $1.25, that's all that frame is. First I'm going to start out with some tissue paper. I'm taking watercolor and I'm just blending about 3 to 4 different colors on that I want to use for my rose colors. Just quickly brushing my color on, and then I'm going to set the color with heat. That'll help bring the color to more of a permanent stage and set that color in nicely. Once I have my colors on, I take my heat tool and I heat set the colors. I used the backer of the frame as a template of where I wanted to create my rose patterns and how big I needed to make my painted area. I'm going to be creating this on watercolor paper. I used the Canson 140 pound weight watercolor paper. It worked perfect for this project. If I had to do this over again, I probably would go ahead and scoot that little template closer to the middle. That way I would have had plenty of room on my right side as well. It all worked out, but just for your own use in the future, I would maybe just do it smack dab in the middle. So then you have make sure that your picture has paint on all sides, and when you put it in the frame, it'll look perfect. I'm going to be starting this project by doing a blend on blend of paint. I'm just using Decor Art colors. I have Desert Tan, which is the dark turquoise, Bahama Blue, Citron Green, is the really pretty bright green, are the colors that I'm going to be using for my background. I'm looking at creating kind of a blend on blend color. Oh, it looks like I'm going to be adding maybe a little white too. I'm not for sure. I can't remember if I added that white in or not. But I take just a big filbert brush, anything too special, and I just crisscross my brush going different directions, just creating an irregular background, starting with that turquoise color, blending it across, and then I add the other lighter colors on top of that. Once I had that turquoise color on, I picked up a little bit of the Bahama Blue and started just the similar process of crisscrossing my brush back and forth and blending my colors. Once I had a little bit more of that Bahama Blue on, blending those colors together, that's when I picked up my green, the Citron Green, and blended that across as well. I'm just doing that crisscross motion, having a irregular background, and blending it as I go. You can see I picked up a little bit of the dark green too. Once I had those colors all on, I gave it a quick dry and moved on to the next step. Here I was checking to make sure my picture had enough color for the whole background, and I make a circle where I want the bottom rose to be, and I just put in an idea of where I wanted to have 3 more roses at the top. This is just a general idea, a rough draft, and I kind of had it starting off to the right and then going more into a triangle shape up to the left. So they aren't all just in a simple little row. To add a little bit more interest, I wanted them off to the side. So once I had my areas done, this is where I'm going to build my 3D roses, and I'm going to be using that tissue paper. I'm tearing my paper first kind of in a circle, and then I'm going to be tearing a spiral shape. This is so that my pieces kind of lay down a little bit easier. These are going to be my petal shapes. The tissue paper is going to work perfectly for this because it's fairly soft and it squishes and it sculpts really easily. So first I tear some spiral shapes, and then I'm going to be putting them down and creating the rose shapes with this. To glue these pieces down, I'm going to be using my favorite glue, the Liquitex Matte Medium. This is my favorite gluing material when I'm doing these mixed media pieces. Matte Medium always dries flat, and it dries non-sticky, and it's going to be perfect for laying these pieces down. I can put some glue right on my paper, take a brush and spread the glue out, and then I'm going to be laying the tissue paper down on top of that area. You can see I just made a circle, kind of followed my general idea. Now I'm going to be taking that tissue paper and I'm going to be laying it in a circular, kind of a spiral configuration and squishing it as I go. The center needs to be the tightest area, like a rose would be, where my petals would be tight. And then I'm going to be gradually adding more pieces as I go. I can also use the end of my paintbrush to kind of push and sculpt my pieces in the middle. But this is where I'm deciding where I want to put my middle of my flower. At first I had it up a little bit higher, but I do end up scooching it down a little bit. Where that middle center bud is, that's where it's going to be the center of your flower. So I wanted to scooch it down just a little bit more so I could have some petals on the top as well. So something to take in consideration when you're building these 3D flowers is where the center is and where the petals will be placed. So by scooting that center down, I'm going to be having some petals at the top as well. Building these little 3D roses is as simple as putting your paper on, putting the glue on, and then squishing your pieces together and then shaping them into a rose shape. I add the glue, the matte medium, to the top of the flower too. I want the tissue paper completely covered with glue just to make sure it's all going to stick together, plus it's going to make that tissue paper a lot firmer once it has the glue on it. So I just continue around my shape, ripping the paper, putting it on piece by piece to make the petals, and squishing it together, making sure that I have a 3D look to it and not so flat. Having those original pencil lines there helps me determine how big I want to have my flower. So I keep on going with my pieces until I get to that area of where I drew my pencil line. You can also put your frame over the top if you would like to take a second look to make sure you have your flower kind of going all to the bottom of your frame. Now to do the smaller areas for the smaller flowers, it's the same process. I made the buds mostly in my hand right away and just kind of set them down on the paper and then used my fingers to squish them together and add glue on the top. I also used the end of my paintbrush to kind of sculpt them as well. And that's all there is to it to make the small ones. It's just basically like the big ones, but on a smaller version. And again, I set my frame over the top to see where I was at with the process, if I needed to add more or just keep it as is. Once I had my roses placed all on, I gave them a quick dry. They don't have to be completely dry at this stage, but I went ahead and gave them a quick dry, and then now I'm setting up my colors to create kind of a greenery look into the background. The colors I'm going to be using are evergreen, Hauser medium green, desert turquoise, and a bright color of green called citron green. In this stage, I'm not looking to create perfect little leaf shapes. I'm coming in and just making an idea or a feel of greenery in the background. I'm using a little larger filbert brush. This is going to loosen up my brush strokes and create that very loose background that I'm looking for. I want to make sure I'm creating some contrast in my painting, having dark and light. Here you can see me putting some sgraffito in my background, which is just a fancy word for scraping into the background with the end of my paintbrush. I'm adding some stems and then scratching in some leaf shapes as well. Go ahead and give my piece a dry, and then up next I'm going to be adding the next layer. This time I'm going to be adding a little lighter version of the same colors I just put on. I start with my bright greens. I'm also going to add in some white at this stage. I believe I used gesso for this step. But now I'm going to be creating that lighter color on the top. I'm also holding my brush up on the very top of it, so I'm creating that loose stroke work again. Yep, I did use some of the gesso. I like using gesso as my white. You do have to be a little careful. It can get really bright right away, so I'm making sure I'm adding some green into that gesso because I don't want pure white right away. I'm going to save those bright pops of white for the very end, kind of like a little bit of glitter. If you think of it that way, save your bright whites as just the sparkle in the end. It's going to make a bigger punch if you do. So you can see I have some leaf shapes, but not a lot. This step is going to be some creative mark work that I'm going to be creating, and I'm going to be using the Stabilo's Marks All pencil with this. This is a great pencil to do sketching with. I hold it a little farther away and kind of push and pull. This pencil is also water activated, so once you add water to it, you can soften your lines as well, but it makes a beautiful dark line. And I'm adding a stronger leaf pattern then, but I'm still adding that loose quality to my painting by holding my pencil farther away even when I'm doing the little bit of drawing sketch work on there. To add a little bit more interest to my painting, I'm going to be adding a different type of flower. It's just a simple, I'm going to call it a fun flower. It's not an exact flower. It has 5 petals, and I started with some white first, and then I put in a lighter shade of the blue on top. I wanted to add the bright first, and then now I'm adding a medium over the top, and then I come back in and I do add a little bit more bright on the very top of that. By doing it this way, you're going to add a little bit more interest to these tiny little flowers and have a little bit more freedom or free-flowing look to these flowers by having those multiple layers with the paints. Today my tutorial is a part of a YouTube collaboration hosted by Annie with Indie Annie Jones. You're going to find the link to her channel inside of the description box, as well as a playlist that has all of the other videos that other creators have joined in today's collaboration. Definitely take some time, check out Annie's channel, as well as click that playlist. I'm sure you're going to be inspired to create something pretty with flowers. Now I'm doing a final little step here. I'm adding a little bit of watered down gesso and I'm tapping it over the top. This gives it kind of a nice cloudy effect to my projects, and I like adding that on there. Now I'm going to be taking a little bit more poppier color. I'm going to be bringing out the really good paint now. I'm going to be using some golden fluids. I'm using quinacridone magenta, a little bit of the pyro red color, and I'm also going to be using some neon color in the liquid Basics Liquid Tex. These are some of my favorite colors. It is a little bit more expensive paint, but the pigments in them are beautiful and they're well worth buying and spending a little bit. Life is short. Buy the good paint, as we say, and then use it once you do buy it. I'm watering it down and blending some of those colors, and I'm adding those colors to my roses. And I'm putting them on the outside, on the inside. They're just a beautiful pop of color. And now I'm adding some to the green as well. I'm going to be adding some in the background, a little bit of those red colors, but I want to soften them and dirty them down a little bit. So I'm going to be adding some to the green, adding a little bit of the white to it as well. And then I decide, let's go ahead and add some water to this too. I'm going to take some sprayer, I'm going to take my spray bottle, and I'm mixing up a little bit of that red and a little bit of the green and some white, putting that on there, and I'm going to give that a little bit of a squirt and see if I can't get that color to run for me a little bit. I wanted to soften it and have it puddle and pool on those flowers just to even pop the texture a little bit. I like the look and I definitely would do it again. I love experimenting with these little paintings. They're small, it doesn't take that long to do them, and it's fun to see if you can't get something to turn out unexpected when you're doing these little paintings. After putting some of the white on the background and that watery look, I decided I wanted to add some to my flowers as well. So I took the gesso with my paintbrush and tapped it in, took the water and sprayed my flowers. I wanted that white to kind of sit and puddle inside of there and really add to the texture. I gave it a dry and then continued on with my painting. I got my Posca pens out and I wanted to add a little bit of an idea of some baby's breath. I wanted to change up the feeling by adding a different type of texture with a different art medium, and these paint pens were great for this. I just needed to make sure I was tapping straight up and down to create the baby's breath look. I'm creating little clusters of little tiny flowers, and it was nice to have a different shape in there as well and a different size. So I'm just creating 3 little clusters of these flowers, kind of like in a triangle shape. Once I had the tops of the flowers created, I used my Kimberly 9XXB soft charcoal-y style pencil and created the stems for the flower. I also did a little bit of scribbling on the outside just to add a little bit more interest. It's all about the layers on these pieces, and I love that pencil. Now to add a little bit bright pop of color, I took my pink Posca pen, and I love that shade of pink, and I'm just doing some little dash marks randomly here and there and incorporating little pops of pink. Since my frame was that really pretty shade of gold, I wanted to add some gold to my roses as well. And this folk art treasure gold color is gorgeous. It shines very pretty. I'm using just the side of my paintbrush and just brushing it over lightly across the texture, and it's picking up the tops of the roses. This is really a very pretty look, and it looked great on this piece and just popped it just the right amount of gold. I also took a little bit of that paint, and since it's such a translucent color, I was dry brushing it a little bit over the leaves in the background to even add just a little bit of that gold into my background. You can see how the texture is really showing and beginning. All those layers are really making a difference in this small little art piece. I gave my piece another quick dry, and I wanted to add the next layer. I was going to be using some Stays On ink in the color Timber Brown. Stays On ink is a permanent ink, so once you put it on, it's going to stay put. And I have this stamp that has some nondescript lettering on it, and it worked perfect to add that next layer of an element on my piece. Again, it's all about the layers, and this worked perfect to add a little bit of text in my background. And for the final step, I'm going to go ahead and just cut my piece out. Now you could go ahead and put a clear coat over the top of this. You could spray it with a clear coat if you wanted to. I was going to be putting this in a frame, so I didn't even bother clear coating my piece. I'm just going to stick it on the top, use my scissors and clip off the edges and put it in my frame. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at what this piece is going to look like, all finished, sitting in my studio. If you're new to my channel and you like doing art and crafts, come on over and see what I'm doing. I'd love to have more creative friends join me. Give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment, and let me know what you might have learned new when I created this piece. If you enjoyed watching this piece created, here's a couple more videos you might want to check out. Well, thanks for hanging out with me today, and hopefully you'll come back and see me again, and next time you'll create right along with me.